League of Legends' second champion of 2022 has released, and it's the Supprot Renata Glasc. The Chmebaroness comes with a number of intriguing abilities that can perfectly complement a team's composition and be an AD carry's dream. So let's dive into how she works and operates, as well as some general tips and tricks to get the most out of her. Renata's passive is Leverage. Renata's basic attacks mark her enemies and deal bonus damage. Damage from Renata's allies consumes the mark, dealing additional damage. Be aware that Renata can only mark one enemy at a time, so ensure that you and your AD carry are attacking the same unit. Her Q is Handshake. Renata sends out a missile that roots the first enemy hit. She can reactivate the ability to throw the enemy in a target direction, damaging enemies hit and stunning them if the thrown target is a champion. Her Q doesn't have the most range and is fairly slow at being activated, so ensure you lead this skill shot before using it. Renata's W is Bailout. This grants an allied champion or herself ramping attack speed and move speed towards enemies. If the ally gets a takedown on an enemy champion, the buff duration resets. If the ally would die while Bailout is still active, their health is set back to full, but they begin burning to death over 3 seconds. The ally can stop the burn by getting a champion takedown before they die. Her E is Loyalty Program. Renata sends out Chemtech rockets that can shield allies, as well as damage and slow enemies that they pass through. The rockets also apply their effects around her on cast and in an explosion at max range. Because this spell goes through units, you can actually use this through minion waves to deal damage to enemies that are trying to evade your attacks. Finally, her ultimate is Hostile Takeover. Renata sends out a cloud of chemicals that cause enemies to go berserk, increasing their attack speed and forcing them to basic attack anything around them. Remember, berserk enemies prioritize attacking their own allies, then neutral units, then Renata's team, and then Renata herself. Your ultimate moves at a very slow pace, so you'll need to get as close as you can to your opponents before activating it or locking them down so they cannot escape its path. Let's talk about her gameplay. Renata's an aggressive support with a lot of frustrating abilities that make it difficult for the enemy to deal with. Most of her abilities are skill shots requiring good accuracy and anticipation of your opponent's movement to get the most out of her. Her abilities also have a very long cooldown and not a huge amount of range, so if you're not hitting them regularly, you're not going to be doing much to help your team. When working with your abilities, you'll want to start with your E and max rank that as soon as possible. This is your main source of damage and the ability with the most practicality in lane. It provides a slow and damage when hitting opponents, making a good opportunity to trade effectively or shielding your teammate when an opponent decides to come in. Grab your Q second, as this is going to work in combination with your E, but don't max it out. Next, you'll want to grab your W and max it out second to your E. Let's talk about the laning phase. It can be tough due to the limited range of your abilities and the high cooldowns. You need to try and take control of the brush if you want to have a chance of getting ahead and ensure you've got a carry that synergizes well with Renata. You need to get up in the face of the opponent, so you can't afford to not be on the same page, and you'll need to be aggressive. Use your E when you can, as it will pass through units and has an area of effect at the end of its cast, making it a much easier spell to use. If you can get a clean Q cast, you'll want to use it to root your enemy as long as possible before dragging it towards you, so you and your carry can unleash as much damage as possible. When you're going for an all-in, you'll need to use your W effectively. There's not always a right and wrong time to use it. If you leave it too late, you'll miss out on the attack speed buff, and if you haven't got the ability to kill a unit, your passive won't bring you or your carry back to life. If you think you have the edge and the range advantage, I would use W early on so your carry can get the most of the attack speed and the movement speed. If it's looking even, I would wait until one of you is nearly dead to make use of the passive revive. If you're behind and looking like you'll lose the fight, use it early to get the movement speed buff and get out of the fight early. If it's a tough lane matchup, you've got good kit to help keep you and your carry safe while you wait for a jungler to gank. Once you're up and running with a few items, you'll want to ward major areas of the enemy jungle and try to roam and catch out some enemy champions. Approaching champions from the side can give you great opportunities to use your E and Q in combination with your teammates to be able to get some easy kills and give yourselves much easier time on the map. As for the late game, you're a great initiator because of how much kit you have. You need to be making life easier for your carries to deal damage and get some free hits down. Your ultimate is a great tool to catch out enemies and equally effective at disengaging. Try to catch out an enemy with poor positioning so your team can collapse on them and give you an early advantage in the fight. Now let's talk about some combos. Renata's combos are fairly straightforward given her kit. Here's her basic burst combination. You want to grab an opponent with Q using your second Q to drag them closer to you, or throwing it at another enemy to stun both of them, followed by your E to deal damage and slow, then W on your carry to get that ramping attack speed and movement speed, followed by an auto attack from yourself to place a mark, and your carry can consume it to deal extra damage. Sometimes you might find that using your E will benefit you to be able to land a more effective Q, as they can often escape your grasp. As for an all-in combo, this is more of a setup for your team to get the ball rolling in fights. Your job is to initiate and take all of the focus off your team and hopefully burn a few abilities in the process. The order of this isn't too important. I would try and lead with your Q if you can, but you can equally start with R, as that has a bigger range with a larger area of effect. And if it hits a cluster of enemies, your team are free to pick off who they want. This would then set up for an easy Q and E afterwards. If you do land your Q early on, it leaves your ultimate free to be more selective of when to use it, or you can use it to disengage. Let's talk about team synergy. Renata is great with anyone that can help you lock down opponents and deal damage at range. In terms of carries, Renata works well with champions such as Caitlyn and Jinx, as their traps can root an enemy for extended periods of time if you can land a Q on them and drag them into the trap. Equally, champions that can deal lots of damage in short spaces of time, such as Misfortune and Tristana, work a treat. Renata fares well against any champions that lack range or mobility, such as Xayah, Varus, Jhin, Vayne, Nami, Lux, and Leona. Renata's not the most mobile champion and lacks a lot of range, so carries such as Caitlyn, Ezreal, Twitch, and Draven that can keep their distance, slow her down, or disrupt her from getting near them make her job very difficult. Equally, any supports that have range and can spam abilities like Xerath are strong opponents. And you can't forget that any champions that have a hook like Nautilus, Thresh, or Blitzcrank will make her life a nightmare. Below you can see the runes I've chosen for Renata that focus on sorcery and inspiration. Sorcery focuses dealing damage where possible while also aiming to reduce cooldowns, while inspiration aims to increase movement speed and give you a head start to building your Zhonya's hourglass with a stopwatch. There are alternative options in terms of your runes, but it's all very dependent on how you like to build Renata. Let's talk about itemization. Overall, there are two ways to build Renata. You can go full utility that aims to enhance her team and offer the initiation they need, or you can go full tank. Your starting item should be Spell Thief's Edge to get the mana buff, gold generation, and eventually the extra wards when it upgrades to Frostfang. Your mythic is the biggest decision point with 3 equally great options that all build the same. Which you will take depends on your team, the opposition team comp, and how you like to play. Imperial Mandate is a solid option as it works well with your Q and E to deal extra damage and mark your opponent. It then helps synergize with your passive to deal even more damage while also granting extra movement speed. It's probably the safest option and you can never really go wrong with it. If your team lacks damage, or the other team is fairly tanky, it's the best option. Shurelia's Battle Song is another great choice as it grants nearby allies 30% move speed when activated. Its passive also grants movement speed to you and your ally when you heal, shield or buff an ally. This is achieved when using your W or your E. It's perfect when the opponents have a lot of escapes, movement speed and disengage to keep the pressure on them. It also gives your squishier champions a bit more kiting potential against more aggressive opponents. Moonstone Renewer is also a solid option, although not necessarily my personal favourite, as it heals nearby champions with the most missing health, as well as stacking heal and shield power the longer you're in combat. I think this choice has less options and less opportunities to be fully used, and requires you to build tanky to get its full use. And if you're really going to go down the tank route, Locket of Iron Solari is also a great option for the health, armor, magic resist, and the active that grants allies shields. For boots, due to Renata's high cooldowns, Ionian Boots of Lucidity are the only logical option. Your next item is a Judgement Call and depends on your build path to this point. The main two you're looking at are Zhonya's Hourglass and Ardent Censer. Ardent Censer is going to boost an allied champion's attack speed as well as giving them added magic damage when shielded or healed. This is a good option if your team has a lot of engage already and isn't relying on you as much as a point of entry, or if the opponents are giving your AD carry a tough time and you need to protect and peel for them more. If you're getting into big scraps at this point, Zhonya's Hourglass is a strong option to help you engage on the enemy to take away the focus on your stronger champions and keep you safe. The next item you want to pick up, if you haven't built Zhonya's Hourglass yet, now's the time to do it. If you haven't built Ardent Sensor, it may be best to build Redemption if your team need extra sustain in fights. Your AD carry may not need the steroid boost from this at this point, but your other teammates could use your help. Redemption is going to help proc Shirelia's Battle Song's passive, which adds movement speed, and if you did build Ardent Sensor. As for your next item, if you've still not yet built Redemption, now's the time to do it. Otherwise, Staff of Flowing Water is a great option as it gives you extra ability power and increased shield and healing power. Its passive also grants allied champions extra ability power and ability haste when shielding or healing. Frozen Heart is a solid tank option due to the fact it lowers your cooldowns, so you can be a real pain during teamfights with your slows and roots whilst also sustaining for an extra period of time. Your final item, if you're going the tank route, Force of Nature is the final item you should look to take. We hope you've enjoyed this guide, and if you did, do drop a like rating and subscribe for more League of Legends videos. And if you're looking to upgrade your setup to dominate in League of Legends with a new keyboard, mouse or headset, head over to ROCCAT.com.